We don't know who he was, where he came from, or where he went.
Hi folks, it's me, Ryan Burns, the DB Cooper Sleuth, and today I'm going to be looking at this video which has 23 million views, which is just nuts. This is Buzzfeed's The Strange Disappearance of DB Cooper. Now, this thing is a little bit dated. It came out in 2017. It says March 10th, 2017, so it's almost 8 years old, which is pretty old, I guess, for this sort of stuff. But anyways, I'm just going to warn you, I am going to be very, very pedantic. I will be stopping frequently to talk about little things that are off, and well, there's probably going to be a lot that's off considering the date of this being 8 years old. We've learned a lot about this case in the past 8 years. In fact, 2017 is when the first files from the FBI's investigative vault began to be released so that we could really learn more about this case and not just rely on hearsay and speculation and outdated sources and things like that. We could actually look at the FBI's files about this case. So there's going to be a lot of outdated information, I'm sure, but I don't want to be too harsh on these guys. So anyway, we're going to jump in, and without further ado, I will start.
This week on BuzzFeed Unsolved, we discussed the famous case of DB Cooper, a case that the FBI has referred to as one of the great unsolved mysteries in FBI history. It's also considered one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in U.S. history. It's a favorite of mine.
Yeah, I've heard of this one a little bit, just a little bit.
A little bit.
Oh, you haven't heard it like I'm about to tell it.
Oh boy.
Okay,
Strap in.
Let's strap in, baby. Let's get into it. On Wednesday, November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, a man going by the name Dan Cooper bought a $20 one-way ticket on Northwest Orient Airlines with cash for flight number 305.
I'm sorry to be pedantic. Northwest? Northwest that should be a lowercase w, but okay. Pedantic again.
From Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. Cooper was described as being in his mid-40s and wearing a business suit, a black rain-type overcoat, brown shoes, a white shirt, and black tie. He carried a dark briefcase and a 4-inch by 12-inch by 14-inch paper bag.
Look at them doing solid work on the mystery bag. Check out my YouTube short about the mystery bag if you're interested. But hey, props to them for including this bag. A lot of people don't talk about this bag, and what was in this bag, we have no idea. But very critical, apparently, I think, to his survival, I would think.
Before the plane took off, Cooper, seated in seat 18C, ordered a bourbon and soda.
Oh boy, 18C. No, Cooper's seat was 18E. 18C would be the aisle seat on the left side of the plane. Cooper was on the right side of the plane as you face forward.
He seems like a cool dude.
I don't think he even ordered the bourbon and soda to calm his nerves. I think
He's probably just like,
he's a
bourbon
badass.
soda. Now, I'm DB Cooper. I'm a mystery man. Give me a bourbon. That's a big gulp.
After the plane had taken off, a little after 3 p.m., Cooper handed the stewardess a note. At first, she just put it in her pocket without looking at it. But then Cooper said, quote, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb," end quote. Wait, what's so funny about that? He has a bomb.
I think it's funny that he passed her a note to be discreet about it. Like, hey, keep this on the down low. And then she was just like, thanks, and walked away. And he was like, hey, you might want to read that because I've got a bomb. Oh, God damn it. Yeah, I got a bomb, everybody.
Cooper told...
Yeah, he's not wrong. I mean, apparently Flo Schaffner said that she thought it was she thought it was a mash note, which I guess is an old term for a hitting on you. This was the 1960s, 1970s. This was the era of the, quote, sexy stews, the stewardesses. And they did get hit on a lot, and part of their job, I suppose. But that's just how guys were back then. Think of Don Draper. I don't think Don Draper could pass up the opportunity to have hit on an attractive young stewardess. But anyway, yeah, so Flo put the note in her purse there and sat down in the jump seat behind Cooper, and ended up, Cooper turns and looks at her, and he's staring at her, and she looks back at him. She says that she matched his gaze, and they just kind of had a staring contest for a few seconds. I'm sure it felt longer than it really was, but she said they just stared at each other, and eventually he goes, "Miss, you better read that note right now." And that is when she saw it, and when she read it, and she said that she nearly fainted when she read it. And of course, she gets up and sits down next to him, and the first thing she says, "Are you for real?" And he goes, "Yes, miss, this is very real."
Her the bomb was in his briefcase and asked her to sit next to him. He opened his briefcase to show red-colored sticks surrounded by an array of wires. After that, Cooper asked the stewardess to write down what he was saying and take it to the captain. Quote, "I want $200,000 by 5 p.m. in cash. Put in a knapsack. I want 2 back parachutes and 2 front parachutes. When we land, I want a fuel truck ready to refuel. No funny stuff, or I'll do the job."
No funny stuff.
I also like how he says, "do the job."
I'll do the job.
Like that's his threat, which actually to
That's
me,
badass.
he's not a dime store criminal. Let's just say that.
He's
I'm on board with the Coop train.
Me too.
I mean, that is rather. I do like that. No funny stuff, or I'll do the job. That is a bit Hollywoodish, isn't it? Yeah, no funny stuff, see, or I'll do the job. Yeah, like that's kind of like what it kind of sounds like Hollywoodish. We do have a hijacking, one of the Cooper copycat hijackings. We do have some of the passengers told the media that it sounded like the hijackers were quoting stuff from TV shows. So maybe Cooper was like that too.
Dude, I'm a fan of this guy.
You a big Coop head?
I'm a Coop head.
One odd detail was that Cooper asked for the $200,000 to be exclusively in $20 bills.
Okay. Well, officially, no. Officially, no. We're not too sure about that. I guess there's some discussion about that. Okay. So generally, it is thought that the pilots, when they called down, they said that that denomination of the bills is not important. Okay, that's actually part of the radio transcript that we can read. Is that the denomination of the bills is not important. But later on, there are some sources from later on that indicate in later interviews with Tina Mucklow and Florence Schaffner, who are the 2 stewardesses who primarily worked with Cooper, that he may have actually asked for $20 bills. And that when it showed up, because Flo Schaffner is quoted in a paper later on, years later, I mean, this is 10 years later, and I would love to ask her the veracity of this quote, but I don't know why. I mean, I guess if they misquoted her, she could have sued them, because she was still alive. So I assume it's a correct quote. But she says that he asked for it in $20 bills, and she forgot to write that on the note. And that when she went back there eventually after he got the money and saw that it was in $20 bills, that she was relieved, like, whew, thank God, because, she was worried that she had forgotten that detail. And so she was happy to have seen that. So, but that's not in the official documentation anywhere. The pilot, when he communicated it, did say denomination of the bills is not important. But, I mean, it seems like every other hijacker that I know of generally demanded their money in a specific denomination, right? I mean, you don't want to have them show up with barrels full of $1 bills. So I could see Cooper doing that for sure. And Flo just overlooking that.
The flight landed in Seattle, and Cooper exchanged the 36 passengers on the plane for the money and the parachutes he had requested. Cooper kept some crew members on the plane.
Pedantics. There were 35 passengers. Cooper made 36. So he released 35 passengers.
And had the plane take off for Mexico City, requesting that the plane remain below 10,000 feet. During the second half of the flight, Cooper put on a pair of dark wraparound sunglasses.
Nope. Cooper puts on the sunglasses while he is dictating the ransom demands to Flo. So he had them off in the airport, had them off going through the terminal, had them off when he was having his drink, had them off when he ordered his drink, and had them off when he handed her the note. But he did put them on, basically, as soon as he became the hijacker, he put his sunglasses on. That's kind of the best way to think about that, which makes sense, right? Once you become the hijacker, you want to be, you don't want people to really look at you and pay attention to your eyes. And, like a poker player wears sunglasses sometimes. It kind of intimidates people.
Mustangs with dark rims that would later become part of the sketch that would become famous for anybody familiar with the case.
Yeah, I'm just imagining like a camera just pushing in on him as he's like,
If we were in today's age, this guy would definitely have headphones in playing Spotify playlists of epic soundtracks.
he'd have one of those shitty hoverboards.
Not an actual hoverboard, but
Yeah, he'd be like, or I'll do the job. And he'd take out his wheels, put them down, start moving up and down the aisle. Knapsack, or I'll do the job.
A little after 8 p.m., when the plane was somewhere between Seattle and Reno, Nevada, Cooper jumped out of the rear doors of the Boeing 727 with 2 of the parachutes and the money, never to be seen again.
No, he jumped out with 1 parachute. One of the front parachutes was not in the plane when it landed. So some people think he jumped with one of the little ones there, but the little one that wasn't in the plane could not have strapped up. See, those little parachutes, they actually strap to the the front straps of the big parachutes. And they have to have, the big parachutes have to have things called D-rings for these little parachutes to clip onto. And the big parachutes that Cooper had did not have D-rings for him to hook up the small parachutes. So he could have only jumped with 1 parachute. What he did with the other parachute, which was actually a dummy parachute, it was an inoperable training parachute, which Cooper probably saw and noticed that. But again, he couldn't have used it anyway. But it wasn't in the plane, so what he did with it, the FBI believed he just tossed it out the back for some reason. Who knows? But yeah, he only jumped with 1 parachute.
One thing worth noting is that Cooper took off his black JCPenney clip-on tie before jumping, a piece of evidence that the FBI was able to procure a DNA sample from.
You think James Bond ever wore a clip-on bow tie?
Yeah, I guess. Well, that does kind of...
That's kind of takes the wind out of my sails.
Well, maybe if he knew he had to do it quick, then that was an efficiency thing.
If he was like, I'm gonna put my sunglasses on, it'll look cool. If he was like, clink.
With the DNA sample from the tie, let's jump into the investigation launched to identify the man who called himself Dan Cooper.
Okay, for those unfamiliar, the DNA sample is junk. Okay, that tie was passed around numerous times during an era it was put in the U.S. mail back and forth between different FBI offices. This was a time before they knew what DNA was, so nobody's wearing gloves, nobody's taking evidentiary precautions with it that you would have with evidence now. So it highly contaminated as far as DNA goes. In fact, the only DNA they were able to get off of it was 3 very partial profiles. 1 major contributor, they call it, and 2 minor contributors. So 1 profile is a little better than the others, but they were all very partial. And according to the FBI's crime lab people, the DNA partial profiles could literally match millions of people. So anybody watching this, some of you would have a match with the DNA taken from Cooper's tie of those 3 profiles, the partial profiles. So the DNA is really not, and again, we don't know whose DNA that is, right? This thing was passed around. They literally would put it in the U.S. mail to send to other FBI offices to go show the spouses of suspects and say, oh, did your husband wear this tie? That sort of thing. So, it was sitting in their car as they're having, McDonald's hamburgers and things, the FBI agents, it's wasn't being like, it wasn't a holy relic like you would expect in today's law enforcement to be taking care of things like a thing like this that would have DNA on it. They didn't know what DNA was. They didn't care. So why were they going to take precautions like that? So that DNA is almost, I would bet it's not, any of it is Cooper's DNA probably at this point. But the DNA profiles are really they're not great. Like I said, the FBI said it could be millions of people. And even if it matches, even if some suspect matches the profile, that doesn't make him Cooper. That just means he's related to somebody whose DNA ended up on the tie in the preceding 30 years before this was tested in 2001. So the DNA, we don't have Cooper's DNA. There is a piece of his hair that we think was his hair that was recovered, and it is missing. The FBI, they mounted it on a microscope slide, and it has gone missing. But that's really the only hope we have, in my opinion, for D.B. Cooper's DNA, is if that hair slide's found. But again, who's to say it's D.B. Cooper's hair? So that's another problem. But it's a lot better than this partial profile that could encompass millions of people. So just a heads up on the DNA. There is no DNA. There is no viable D.B. Cooper DNA at this moment.
The case was called NORJAC, standing for Northwest Hijacking, and would last decades. The plane was intensely searched for evidence. Desperate to find Cooper's identity, there was extra interest in $20 bills, because the FBI had released the serial numbers of the bills stolen by Cooper. Remarkably, in 1980, 9 years after Cooper's escape, a young boy found a rotting package filled with $20 bills.
Okay, it wasn't a package. Brian did not find a package. He found 3 packets of $20 bills. Cooper's money was basically, if you think of a paper bank strap, it was 100 bills. It was $2,000 per packet, okay, of $20 bills. So 120 is each packet. And they were, these packets had those bank straps on them, right? And they were bundled together in, the bank says packets of 5, okay, but Brian found 3 packets bundled together. So the bank says they were bundled in packets of 5, bundled in 5 packets apiece, and Brian finds a bundle that's got 3 packets together. So what does that mean? It'd be nice if they had photographed the money, right? Because if you find, if we knew for certain that it was bundled in packets of 5 and Brian finds a packet of 3, then that probably means that money did not get there naturally, right? That somebody took 2 packets out and put that in the, I don't know, Tina bar, which is the sandbar where the money was found. That's a mystery within the mystery. But no, it was not in a package that Brian found.
That matched the ransom money serial numbers. There was $5,800 in all. The boy found the bills on a beach at Tina bar.
Subsequent testing has revealed 10 additional serial numbers. Brian Ingram, the young lad who, he's now a grandfather, but Brian, who found the money, had some of these little bits and pieces that he had taken to a clearinghouse or an auction house or whatever it's called in maybe 2015, 2016. And they did find evidence that there were 10 additional serial numbers that were not previously marked. So it was $6,000 that he found, according to Brian.
While making a campfire with his father, people theorized that when Cooper jumped out, the money possibly fell into the Washougal River before eventually making its way to Tina bar. That's basically all they've theorized.
I'm just imagining him just jumping out and immediately just losing grip of all the bags.
Not crazy, but I mean, at least one of his copycats, we know, had his money blow off of him when he opened his parachute. The fact that none of the money has showed up in circulation since then indicates something, perhaps. Not that he died, but it could indicate that he never spent the money, maybe because he knew it was hot. Although, I mean, nobody's checking serial numbers back then, really. And it's 10,000 non-sequential serial numbers in these packets, and only banks on the West Coast, only a few banks on the West Coast got these, and only for major transactions. Like if somebody came in with, $10,000 of 20s, then they would check them. That's what they were for. So if you're interested, you can go to my website, norjack.org. I have all 10,000 serial numbers on there. If you happen to have a 1969 or 1963 $20 bill, you can check and see if it's one of those. And that $20 bill would be worth quite a lot of money. So if you're watching and you have a 1969 series or a 1963 series $20 bill, go check. And there may even be a couple 61 series maybe. But definitely go check on my website, norjack.org. But the whole washing up there is not really likely now that we know that money bundles don't float. We've done experimentation on this. If you tossed if you had a packet or a bundle of 3 packets, if you had $6,000 in 20s and you threw it in a river, it would sink to the bottom of the river within minutes. It becomes waterlogged, the paper, the cotton, or linen, whatever the whatever it's made of, whatever dollar bills are made out of. I'm not that kind of guy, but they get waterlogged and they immediately sink. So that money did not float down the Washougal River. It did not float down any river. It didn't float down the Columbia River either. So how it got there, like I said, is a mystery within the mystery, but who knows?
Just a man plummeting to earth with a bunch of money flying around him and like, ah!
Though, this discovery would ultimately lead to nothing, as the FBI scoured the surrounding beaches, finding nothing else. In the year that followed the hijacking, several letters were sent to the FBI, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and Seattle Times, either confessing to the crime, eulogizing a recently deceased D.B. Cooper, or claiming to be his brother. In fact, in November 1972, two men, Donald Sylvester Murphy and William John Lewis, were taken into federal custody on charges of extortion for impersonating Cooper and selling his tell-all story to a tabloid.
Wow. Okay, look at them doing good work here. Donald Sylvester Murphy. How about that? That's interesting to see that name pop up. Yeah, I have a whole video about this guy. Coincidentally, this guy is the only person who ever went to prison tangentially for this crime. And it was for impersonating D.B. Cooper and extorting money out of this Newsweek guy. But it's a huge coincidence. This guy happened to really look like Cooper. In March of 72, when they showed this extortionist photograph to the witnesses, several of them said that he looks the most like Cooper of any of the hundreds of suspects that the FBI had shown them up to that point. He wasn't Cooper, but it's still pretty interesting. And hey, kudos to them for actually talking about Donald Sylvester Murphy in a video that's 8 years old now. Pretty cool.
With that, let's jump into the suspects. The first suspect is Richard Floyd McCoy, who is the favorite suspect of former FBI agent Russell Kalam and former federal probation officer Bernie Rhodes. The two men even wrote a book about the case. In April 1972, 5 months after Cooper's escape, the FBI arrested Richard Floyd McCoy for hijacking an airplane. When examined, the McCoy heist is definitely similar to the Cooper heist. Like Cooper, McCoy hijacked a plane and parachuted off.
Yeah, and so did 4 other guys too. McCoy is not the only one, people. He's not special. He's just, he was a Cooper fanboy who was emulating Cooper's heist. He does not mean he was Cooper. There's no planet, galaxy, or universe where Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. was D.B. Cooper.
McCoy jumped out the back rear staircase of a Boeing 727, the same plane Cooper jumped out of, using the same method. Also like Cooper, McCoy requested 4 parachutes.
Yes, but he also brought his own parachutes as well. McCoy brought 2 parachutes with him because he was a skydiver, and skydivers are not going to jump with random parachutes, okay? So he brought his own parachutes with him as well.
Was calm during the heist.
Whoa, okay, calm during the heist. No, my God. No, Richard McCoy and Cooper could not be more different. Cooper was so calm, in fact, that the passengers had no idea that they had been hijacked at all. None of them until it was over with. McCoy was so obvious that he was a hijacker. The pilots, before the hijacking even began, his own pilot called down and said, hey, I think we have a hijacker on the plane. Okay, McCoy left his ransom note, okay, like the note that Cooper handed to the lady. McCoy left that in an envelope inside the terminal at the boarding gate, okay? That's how nervous he was. He forgot his own, ransom note. And when the plane was preparing to taxi, the gate agent walks on the plane waving this envelope. Hey, did somebody leave their envelope on a seat? He jumps up and grabs it. He locked himself accidentally in the bathroom. Had to be let out by a stewardess. Was sweating. His makeup that he had applied was dripping off of his face because he was sweating so much. He was raising his voice, shouting, writing notes like, get the hell off the ground. I mean, he was... No, he was not at all like Cooper. The passengers were very much aware that there was a hijacker on board. He was very, very nervous. And McCoy was a badass. McCoy was a Green Beret, but he was extremely nervous during his own hijacking.
Reportedly, both of the men passed notes to the flight attendants claiming a bomb was on board, a detail that becomes more compelling when you learn that both Cooper and McCoy's notes reportedly contained the phrase, no funny stuff.
Not true at all. you will not find that. It only appears in the book written by these guys. Okay, there are 1,000 pages of McCoy FBI files that are freely, you can read them online. Okay, you can do a OCR search for the word funny, doesn't show up. Doesn't show up in any news articles about McCoy. I mean, if somebody has that, show me, but I have looked. There is no funny stuff. That is an invention, as far as I can tell, of the authors of that book. In passing a note about a bomb, no, McCoy, his note had the pin from a grenade on it and said, "I have a grenade," or whatever. And the note, he passed the note along with the pin of a grenade, which was a dummy grenade, like a paperweight, and also a .45 caliber bullet, because he did have a pistol with him. So he passed his note with a bullet and a pulled grenade pin.
Another suspicious coincidence is the fact that both crimes reportedly occurred while Brigham Young University, where McCoy was a student, was on break.
What? Okay, whatever.
Was a student?
In this theory, yes.
I was thinking about it in like a cold, hard criminal way. I wasn't thinking like, spring break! That sounds kind of fun.
Do you think that's what he yelled when he jumped out the plane? Spring break! He just falls out to his death.
Spring break!
Perhaps the most riveting detail is that according to Kalam and Rhodes, members of McCoy's family identified an object left on the plane by Cooper, an object that was never publicly identified.
They're talking about the tie, okay, which, yes, he was a Mormon. Mormons were going to be, in the 60s, were going to be wearing skinny black clip-on ties. I think they still do.
Some parts of the internet seem to believe that this object was a Brigham Young University medallion with McCoy's initials on it, but this seems to stem from the Wikipedia page on the case, which makes this most likely complete horseshit.
Yes, good Lord. A Brigham Young pin, medallion, what in the hell? No. Look, we have the FBI files. We know exactly what was found on that plane.
I mean, the thing is, if that's the case closed.
Yeah.
Brigham Young University medallion with his initials on it. I mean.
But it's not definitive. It's not.
They just said unidentified object, which is probably like a stick of gum or some stupid shit like that.
Oh, he chewed
he chewed
fruit
Wrigley's.
for sure. Yeah.
He chewed Wrigley's.
Oh, he was a big juicy fruit man.
Yeah, actually, McCoy, whereas Cooper was smoking cigarettes like a chimney, McCoy was chewing. He's a good Mormon kid, I guess. Hijack extortions are not. I don't know, but he followed Mormon. He was a Mormon kid, didn't smoke, didn't drink. McCoy was chewing, he was eating candy, apparently the whole time during his hijacking. So McCoy was eating candy, but whereas Cooper was smoking like a freight train.
Regardless if McCoy is Cooper or not.
He's not.
The FBI eventually ruled out McCoy as a suspect for the Cooper case, mainly because he didn't match the descriptions of Cooper given by the flight attendants, though Kalam and Rhodes listed the two men as looking similar.
Okay, again, every eyewitness to Cooper was shown McCoy's photograph. Every single one of them said, that is not our hijacker. And they gave very detailed descriptions of why. They said his ears stuck out too much. They said his nose was too wide, too young. McCoy, even though there are some videos of him where he looks like an older guy these days, but McCoy was 29, I think, at the time. Yeah, 29 at the time. And all of his eyewitnesses to his hijacking said he was late 20s. Whereas Cooper is as high as in the 50s for his age range. Okay, so McCoy just wasn't Cooper. Again, there are probably 50 pieces of evidence that alone would eliminate McCoy. You combine all 50, and like I said, there's no planet, galaxy, or universe where McCoy was D.B. Cooper. Like I said, 50 pieces of evidence alone would eliminate him. Together, no chance. And again, McCoy is spotted. He has Thanksgiving lunch with people he invited over the day after this. If I'm planning, some hijacking, I'm not having Thanksgiving lunch with a bunch of people I invite over. And getting home, the timing doesn't even work on that. I mean, aside from all the other things that eliminate him, like he had a terrible lisp, he had a birth defect where he couldn't talk right. His own pilots were like, we think this guy back there is disguising his voice. Well, Cooper, of course, had a very clean, low, intelligent sounding voice with no accent. Whereas McCoy's pilots think he's like making up an accent, but that's just the way he talked. But anyway, McCoy is just, I have a video on McCoy too. I have several videos on McCoy, but he was not Cooper.
Additionally, according to FBI archives, McCoy was home with his family for Thanksgiving dinner in Utah the day after the hijacking. Unlike Cooper, McCoy was actually caught after his heist and sentenced to 45 years in prison. McCoy would actually escape from prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, and later die in a gunfight with FBI agents in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I just love how that story has so many, like,
I know.
he's out.
Like,
he's not
yeah.
out. He's out.
Huh?
Shot to death.
Oh.
That was a roller coaster of emotions right there. The second
McCoy actually escaped twice.
suspect is Duane Weber, who claimed to be D.B. Cooper on his deathbed. His wife, Jo, claims that in the hour of his death, Duane pulled her close and said, quote, "I have a secret to tell you. I'm Dan Cooper."
I was trying to take a drink, and I just imagined.
Closer. I have a secret to tell you. I'm the phantom of the sky.
I bet she did not see that one coming.
No, she's probably going to be like,
Did he cheat on me?
exactly, did you cheat on me?
I'm a man of myth.
This revelation led to Jo revisiting what should have been clear clues. According to Jo, Duane had nightmares where he'd sleep talk about, quote, leaving fingerprints on a plane. He also had a knee ailment that he claimed he got jumping out of a plane. Duane's handwriting was reportedly found in the margins of a library book on D.B. Cooper. Jo also claims Duane took her to the place where the money was eventually found on Tina Bar Beach. That's interesting. If
it's true. Yeah, remember, Jo, we like to say that Jo was, or I like to say, I guess, maybe I've heard other people say it, but like essentially Duane Weber is the Forrest Gump of D.B. Cooper, thanks to Jo Weber, his wife. Anything that came up about Cooper, she would have a story for it. Like, the recent revelations that there's titanium particles or something on the tie. If Jo was alive, she'd have been like, oh yeah, Duane worked at a titanium facility. He told me that one time. We were watching TV and he said, oh, I used to work in titanium. I mean, things like that. If there was some story about D.B. Cooper getting swallowed by a whale, she would say, oh, well, she would have said, Duane told me he was swallowed by a whale one time. I said, Duane, you weren't swallowed by a whale. He said, yeah, I was. Like, it was that kind of thing. Jo was, she's dead now, but Jo was a unique character.
that's true, that is interesting.
Wait, what did he write in the margins? This was me.
Cool guy, coolest guy in history, nice sunglasses. Wow, bourbon's great. And finally, Jo claims that Duane had an old Northwest airline ticket for no apparent reason. 29 years after he left the case, here is a quote from former lead FBI agent Ralph Himmelsbach on Duane Weber. Quote, "He does fit the physical description. He does have the criminal background that I have always felt was associated with the case." End quote.
Former lead FBI agent. Well, that's what Ralph would have wanted you to think that he was. No, Ralph was actually never a Norjack agent. The Norjack case was a case out of Seattle. Ralph was a special agent out of Portland. He did handle any leads that came through Portland, but Ralph was never a Norjack agent. Okay, he never was an actual, that was never his case. So
Himmelsbach also believed that Jo Weber's story may have credibility, but ultimately did not believe it was him. She may be telling the truth,
Sounds pretty credible. I don't believe her.
but she's probably lying.
Yeah.
The third and final suspect is Kenneth Christiansen, the favorite suspect of the author Jeffrey Gray. The theory began when Lyle Christiansen, the brother of Kenneth Christiansen, saw an episode of Unsolved Mysteries and became convinced that his brother was D.B. Cooper. Lyle also cites a deathbed confession from his now late brother Kenneth. Kenneth reportedly said, quote, "There is something you should know, but I cannot tell you."
yes, and it's speculated that was probably about his homosexuality, which he was. But no, Kenny Christensen, as I'm sure they'll get into it, I mean, Kenny was an airline, he was a purser, which is like a higher up stewardess. He was a flight attendant, I guess, as a man, but a steward. But this is a guy who worked for Northwest Orient for years up until that point, and then continued to work for them for 20 years. For 20 years afterwards. Okay, now this was a small company. Okay, try to imagine like robbing your own bank. If you were a bank teller, you rob your own bank without much of a disguise on, and interact with people, with employees of your own bank. I mean, maybe not your specific bank branch, but like, say it's a small bank, and say that tellers come and go. This week there might be tellers at your bank where you work, and this week there's other ones. Like, people at Northwest Orient knew who Kenny Christiansen was. He would not hijack his own airline, okay, and then continue to work there for 20 years, okay, especially the fact that he worked on the same route that Tina Mucklow, the lead stewardess who handled most of this stuff. She spent 5 hours with T.B. Cooper. She eventually worked in the 70s, the Far East route, which is the same route that Kenny Christiansen worked on. Okay, they almost certainly knew each other. So, in fact, a couple of years ago at our CooperCon convention, we ran into a Northwest Orient stewardess from that era, and she said that was like an inside joke among people back then. They used to joke with Kenny about being D.B. Cooper because he was so mild-mannered, and yeah, his head kind of looks like the sketch a little bit, but it's also small, though. Kenny was bald, like completely bald, essentially, in 1971. And Cooper was not wearing a toupee because Cooper had a bald spot and Cooper had receding hair. I've never seen a toupee with a bald spot. Or it was balding. I don't know if he had a bald spot, but they said balding. He was bald. He was 5'8", which is pretty damn small to be Cooper, when most of the eyewitnesses said he was about 6 feet tall on average. Yeah, Kenny's just bad. Kenny's a bad suspect.
End quote.
And then he died?
And then he died. Talk about a guy who appreciates a cliffhanger.
Yeah, that's great.
I could, you know what? Touche, Kenneth. Kenneth was a flight purser for Northwest Orient Airlines, the same airline that Cooper hijacked, which would support online suspicion that it was an inside job. Kenneth also loved bourbon and bought a house shortly after the crime, though it was reportedly unassuming. Perhaps the most enthralling part of Gray's theory is the fact that when he showed a picture of Kenneth to a flight attendant who interacted with Cooper, she agreed that of all the suspects she had seen, Kenneth was the closest. Though, she also said, quote, "I can't say yay."
Yeah, okay, this is Flo Schaffner they're talking about. Flo Schaffner said that about, let's see. By my count, well, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so Flo said that about Donald Sylvester Murphy, said this is the closest I've ever seen of Cooper. Then she says that about a guy named Bryant Kofelt in 1976. Oh, looks just like him. Never seen a better picture. Looks more like Cooper. Then apparently she says this about Kenny Christiansen. And then apparently she says this about L.D. Cooper in 2011. So Flo says this a lot. No offense to Flo. But Flo has said this a lot. And remember, this is the frailty of memory. We have FBI documents where Flo Schaffner is telling the FBI in 1976, stop showing me photos of suspects because I no longer remember what the guy looked like. So for her to be saying this stuff, you know, in the 2000s, I mean, she may remember, maybe if she saw his photograph, the real guy, it might jog her. She might have some PTSD flashback or something, but she does say this about a lot of suspects. And Kenny, I don't think Kenny looks like Cooper anyway. I mean, I guess his head shape's right and his kind of nose and everything, but he's bald though. Kenny was bald and small.
End quote. Bizarrely, the FBI debunked Kenneth on the basis that he didn't match the description. So once again, the FBI coming in hot with some weird contradict. I don't know. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
You're cool, FBI. I'm just saying.
You don't want to make enemies of the deep state.
I don't. Especially now with never mind.
Yeah.
Another reason the FBI discredits Kenneth as a suspect is because Kenneth was a paratrooper just after World War II, a detail that is damning according to the FBI, who believes that Cooper was not a skilled jumper.
Maybe he was masquerading as an unskilled jumper.
That's an interesting suspicion, and
It's a difference in being a skilled jumper and a skydiver, okay? Cooper was probably not a skydiver because the guys who did this same crime, who were skydivers, brought their own parachutes, because a skydiver is not just going to say, hey, give me a car. Think about like the Fast and the Furious. Imagine Dom Toretto doing something like this. Vin Diesel, right? He's not going to say, give me a car. He's going to say, I want, XYZ with turbo nitrous oxide. He's not going to just say, give me a car, because they're going to pull up with a Fiat or something, and yeah, it's just, yeah, but no, Cooper, as far as like being a jumper or not, look, the guy did a parachute heist. And basically, I do think he was influenced. There was a heist about 11 days earlier where a guy had the same idea. So I think Cooper was copying that guy. But Cooper was pretty calm to be a guy who had never done this, who had never jumped out of a plane or wasn't a skilled parachutist, right? I mean, I think about this. I tell people this on my podcast, like, don't like the ocean. I've never been scuba diving. I never will go scuba diving. I'm not going to come up with a heist that involves my escape and my freedom and not dying be a scuba diving escape, right? I mean, I'm not doing that. So Cooper was clearly, you would think, knowledgeable about parachuting. But again, the guy who came up with this idea 11 days earlier had never jumped out of a plane before. Now, he was hit with an axe over his head by a flight attendant, and his hijacking failed. But so that might negate that. But Cooper did seem familiar with parachutes. He put it on without any problem, according to the stewardesses. And just his calmness about everything indicates he wasn't nervous about it. So, I mean, if I have to escape on a scuba diving heist and I've never done it, I'm going to be nervous about it. But so I don't think he was a skilled skydiver, but he wasn't a novice at parachuting. He's kind of this, I think he had done a few jumps before, but he wasn't a skydiver per se.
Perhaps. Well, let's get into the next section. And
greatest way to fool someone is to act a fool yourself.
Is that
Julius Caesar?
No,
Shakespeare?
No.
That's not.
No, I didn't think so.
I thought you'd fall into that one.
No. Which brings us to our next suspect, or rather theory, from Special Agent Larry Carr, that D.B. Cooper did not survive the fall. Agent Carr took over the D.B. Cooper case in 2007. Here's a quote from him on the matter. Quote, "We originally thought Cooper was an experienced jumper, perhaps even a paratrooper. We concluded after a few years this was simply not true." End quote. Here's some details that support that narrative. Cooper jumped carrying 2 parachutes. However, only one of them was a functioning chute. The other was a training chute that was sewn shut.
Remember earlier I mentioned that this was an FBI belief that before, they knew he didn't jump with this parachute in the 70s. When Larry Carr took over the case in 2007, Larry's a friend of mine, and he's been on my show. You can see my episodes with him. But he was a little green when it came to understanding parachute stuff when he first took over the case and started talking to the media. So a lot of these statements to the media were when he was not really, up to date on the case. Really, he had just taken it over. But the guys in the 70s, the original agents, they knew that Cooper didn't jump with this dummy chute. So this is a modern construct of the FBI that's incorrect.
Furthermore, the chute that was functional was a military chute that was not steerable. He's kind of starting to sound like an idiot.
A little bit.
The whole time he's like, yeah, bourbon soda. Bomb. Here's your note. I'm a cool guy. Sunglasses. Jumps out the plane. Splat.
It's not a splat. I think a pine tree just... You're just like, no.
Kill me.
Little squirrel runs up to him.
Get out of here!
Here's some more details from Agent Carr. Quote, "No experienced parachutist would have jumped in the pitch black night, in the rain, with a 200-mile-an-hour wind in his face, wearing loafers and a trench coat."
Well, we now know that he wasn't wearing loafers either. He was wearing ankle-high shoes. They just weren't tie-type shoes. They didn't have laces, so they were like little booties. But he was not wearing loafers. That's a myth. And it wasn't raining that hard at all that night. And an experienced parachuter would jump in the dark because the copycat hijackers jumped in the dark too. And several of them were very, very skilled parachutists, including one of them who was the former NCAA champion skydiver who did this and went to prison for it. So yeah, yes, actually an experienced one would jump at night, actually.
The FBI called their search for D.B. Cooper one of the longest and most exhaustive investigations in its history. As of 2011, the FBI case file measured 40 feet long and covered more than 1,000 suspects. So what we presented here is only the tip of the iceberg. The case was open for 45 years before the FBI finally closed it in 2016, though they are still willing to listen to possible leads. What do you think happened?
I'm gonna go Occam's razor on this one and just assume that he rocketed into the ground. A little juxtaposition of him being on the plane being like, I'll have a bourbon. And then 2 hours later,
After all these years, people are still transfixed on the identity of the cunning crook known as D.B. Cooper. But for now, and perhaps forever, the case of D.B. Cooper will remain unsolved.
Okay. I guess that's a mixed bag video, isn't it? Obviously, they're just relying off what they had at the time to make the video, which was a lot of Larry Carr's statements that are now kind of incorrect, I guess, in hindsight. But hey, they get props for including Mystery Bag, for including Donald Sylvester Murphy in there. That's kind of cool. But we got McCoy in there and Weber and Christiansen. The types of suspects we have coming out lately are a lot better, in my opinion, than some of these old suspects. But now McCoy, again, God knows, Dan Grider claims he found Cooper's parachute, which is not true. I have videos about that in McCoy's attic or whatever, or a barn of the McCoy family. But no, McCoy's not Cooper. Christiansen's not Cooper. Weber's not Cooper. Look, D.B. Cooper could have been any one of the millions of people out there who fit that profile in 1971. And we probably don't know his name yet. That'd be my guess, is that if it's in Vegas when they say, are you betting on somebody or are you taking the field, you've got to take the field probably, if you're being honest with yourself with D.B. Cooper. We probably don't know his name and probably won't ever know his name, just kind of sadly. But anyway, all right, well, that's all I've got for today, folks. So like and subscribe. It really, really helps the algorithm if you like this video. It really, really helps. So like and subscribe and all that YouTube-y stuff, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Bye.